Well, my name's David. I work here at the Mind Eye Institute. Sorry for the slightly late start. We were just finishing up with patients, so we're jumping in. I'm the operations director here. I'm alongside Dr. Z, who's going to be leading the presentation. We're so excited for you to attend an overview of visual processing systems in reading problems in adults and children. It's something I know Dr. Z loves to educate on. It's such an interesting thing, how many different ways or how many different things are involved in reading itself. And so we're going to be touching on a lot of those, as well as some causes, some ways that we help, what our role is, what we can do to help people with reading. A couple things before we jump in and get started. These are questions that always pop up. Number one is they ask if there's going to be a recording. There will be a recording available. For those of you who received an email from us, we'll be sending out an email with the link to the recording. The other thing is we are going to be taking questions live. A question everybody always asks is can you talk about pricing? We do have a staff for that. There's going to be a link in the comments available to connect with one of our new patient advocates. And they're there to educate on what it is we do and if you would be a good fit with us. So that's what they're all about, is just educating. And so without further ado, I'm just going to kick it off to Dr. Z. Dr. Z, you want to say hello?
Hi, David, and hi to everyone. You have a list of people, I don't, so I'm glad that people were able to attend. I know in California it's after school hours, and in New York it's dinner time, so thank you for taking the time. So let me see what I'm going to share my screen somehow. Do that on this one. I don't have how did you do it? Let's see, view full screen. Here it is. Okay. Share screen. Okay. Can people see my screen? Yes, no? So David, is my screen visible to everybody?
There it is. Yep. You got it.
So we had talked about this if you had attended the Facebook Live on spatial judgments and misjudging space. There's a continuum from attention to awareness. So it involves attitude and adaptability also. So if you think of your retina as a part of the brain, meaning that if you took your brain and you pulled a chunk of tissue downwards, you get your spinal cord. And if you take the same brain and you pull something forward, you get your retina. So the retina, the brain, and the spinal cord together are your central nervous system. And when we shine light on the retina, it's altering brain activity. And if you shine light on the spinal cord, it's altering body activity. There's been new research on that. But the retina itself has different parts to it. And if all of it is activated, then I term it a floodlight. Then your floodlight, you're getting information for everything. And you would use that floodlight if you want to play a Where's Waldo game and you want to scan for something. Or I dropped an earring one day and I had to scan the floor to find it. Then you turn on the floodlight so you see everything. If you turn on the pen light, that's the opposite. Then you're zooming in just to the center part of your eye and you're looking for small details. So most of the time, people function in the middle. They don't look for tiny little details all the time. They would be looking at either, they would have the floodlight on mute, so it's there for survival purposes, but they would be in the middle and maybe thinking about something in their head. If they choose to look at something and pay attention to details, then they turn the pen light on and zoom their attention, but the floodlight should still stay on a little bit. So reading is a great example of how you'd want to link the two, the floodlight and the pen light. You need the floodlight to know, here's the paragraph I'm reading, where's the end of it, where's the beginning of the next line. So the floodlight should stay on. The floodlight also gives you the gist of what's happening. You would need the pen light part if you get stuck on a word. Excuse me, I swallowed wrong. You get stuck on a word, and you would switch to pen light mode to zoom in on a detail for spelling. Or a proofreader, they would use the floodlight to zoom around. And if they find something that doesn't quite look right, then they turn the pen light on to see what exactly it is. If people live in floodlight mode too long, they're labeled as having attention deficit disorders. If they live in pen light mode, they're labeled as having autism. So most people live in the middle, and you shift from one to the other. So that's called adaptability. You have to adapt so that if you need the floodlight, you use it, and then you come back to the middle. And if you need the pen light, you use it, and you come back to the middle. If your adaptability is not effortless and efficient, then people tend not to shift from their habits, and they're a do it my way or I can't do it type of person. So this is important to know where you or your child fit, because the adaptability is one of the key factors that we at Mind Eye Institute see as an issue. So I've shown this before. From when we put light on, we use lenses, prisms, and filters, and it changes the way your subconscious mind gets information from the environment. Meanwhile, your body has your nervous system, your immune system, your endocrine system, and other systems, your cardiovascular system, your skin, everything. And there's a lot of reflexes that happen at an unconscious level from your body. And the body is also sending signals into your mind. So if you go back to that spinal cord, brain, and retina, that's the central nervous system making decisions, but it's getting information from all the organs of the body and the glands, as well as from the outside through your ears and your eyes. Then your subconscious mind processes everything and then sends a signal to the conscious mind. So you have unconscious body reflexes, subconscious mind things, and conscious mind things, and they all lead to movements. And the movements can be intentional or learned or reflexes. So it's kind of complicated, but when we put light changes on with glasses, we're measuring movements. That's why we're optometrists, we're measuring and measuring movements, changing the light. We're going in a treatment sequence through different things. You have your metabolism, that's your body, and you have your muscle systems, that's your body. But the chemical systems and then the muscle systems are down more at the unconscious level. Then some of it goes up to subconscious. Then you got your perceptual systems, where you have your environmental awareness from your senses. Then you have attention. And then you have memory, storage, and retrieval. And then you have the cognitive systems for thinking. So we get a lot of people lumping together all of these. And what we've done is tried to separate it. This is actually should be more of a circle rather than a paragraph, because you can think and worry and change your metabolism. There's a book called The Biology of Belief that shows how your biochemistry can be altered by how you think. So it's really a loop as opposed to a pyramid. But when we're looking at reading, which is today's topic, we're looking at thinking systems, memory systems, sensory systems, motor systems, energy systems, motivational systems. So they're all used in reading, and even the muscle systems, because you have to control your eyes. So when you have children who can't read easily, we have to first figure out what level the problem's at. You can have nutritional issues where the metabolism isn't working right and there's not enough energy for the muscles to move. You can have muscle control issues where a person tries to move the eyes and they don't move while during reading. You can have some people who move their neck instead of their eyes, and then it's harder to keep your place. You can have a perceptual problem where you're not aware of the paragraph. You can also have an attention problem or a memory problem or a thinking problem. So there's so many reasons why you can have a reading problem. I'm going to start with something like this here. We're going to thank people who are involved. There. Thank the people. So I'm the founder of MindEye, and Donnelly Marcus is a founder of designsforstrongminds.com. We're going to be talking about helpingchildrentoread.com, and David Morgan is a founder. And there's a book called Outsmarting Autism, and Patricia Lemmer is the founder of that. I have the word "to" in large letters because it's hard to remember to add that "to" in. I looked up helping children read, and it wasn't right. I had to put helping children to read. David Morgan has done a lot of reading, and we're going to be using some of his work when I'm explaining. One thing he talks about, as well as I've been talking about for 40 years, is reading requires visualization, imagery. So you have to convert the words into pictures. If you read something like "the boy went to the store," then you can make a picture in your mind, but it's not a very interesting picture. But this is more like a first grade reader would be. By third grade, people add adjectives, and now the picture changes. Now it's a little boy ran to the big store. And then when you get to fifth grade, now you add even more adjectives. The scared little boy raced to the store to buy medicine. So now you have a different type of picture. And then when you get a little older, you have a bigger paragraph. While thinking of his sick mother, the scared little boy raced through the cold November rain to reach the store before it closed so he could buy medicine. So then the picture gets a little bit more intricate. And people who convert words into pictures, that the words are painting a picture, so people who do that enjoy reading. People who don't do that look at this and say, "Oh my goodness, look at all those words." Or you could say, "Look at how many letters there are, or how many pencil strokes there are." It's a lot. So there are the people who say, "I want this high level book because look at the pretty picture it puts in my head." And there's other people who say, "Why can't they just say the boy went to the store?" Because that's what happened. And that's what we have to look at MindEye when we're assessing people for reading problems. We're trying to think of, what are they doing when they read in their head? How are they moving their eyes? How do they judge the space around them? How much of the floodlight is turned on versus the pen light? How much energy are they putting into this? And it changes. So the fact that words paint pictures is interesting, but you can have children who add to it from their heads. There's these domains affected by optometry. So you have, how am I? If you don't have enough energy to survive, you're not going to want to read. If you don't know where you are, you're not going to be able to read. If your environment is overloaded with sensory systems of where and when and what things are, it's going to make reading really hard. And who you are as a person, which is based on individual experiences, is determining what you should do about it. In other words, if you're a person who doesn't care about reading and someone hands you a book, you might say, "I don't want it." If you're a person who loves reading and someone hands you a book, you want to delve right into it. But we talked about also the concept of using central eyesight for details. That's your pen light. And peripheral eyesight for awareness of the background. That's your floodlight. And then the eye being connected to a lot of other things. But this is the part I wanted to get to for reading. It's not only painting pictures of what's on the paper, but it's adding from what's in your head. So for instance, I had a little child who was filling out our paperwork, and the paperwork had name, address, date, and phone. Now, adults look at this and say W stands for work phone and H stands for home phone. But this little girl was too little. So she didn't know work and home for phone. So what did she think? She thought, "I'm at a doctor's office. They got a W and an H. Must be for weight and height." She didn't think. She was really, And I thought that's the brilliant thinking for a little kid, because you're at a doctor's office. What else do doctors measure? Your weight and your height. So then we got into the concept of when you look at something and you're reading, you're adding what's in your head. And what's in your head is limited by how old you are and your experiences. So for instance, if I said to visualize a person, if I said the weight was 100 pounds or 200 pounds, you know, you might not be able to visualize them, because you might say, well, wait a minute, how tall are they? 200 pounds seems a lot unless you're talking about a 7-foot person. And 100 pounds seems very skinny unless you're talking about a 2-foot person. So you'd visualize differently if I said 5'6" versus 6'2". Now the 100 pounds and the 200 pounds are different people. So visualization is different as you're reading and as you're gaining more information. So just like the words I showed, the more words make a different image. Here's more information and it makes a different image in your brain. But then you have body mass index, is the weight from muscles or fat. So you can keep getting information and keep making your picture better and better and better. And that's all structural information. So when we're also evaluating eyes, we're looking at habitual posture, a comfort range, and a tolerance range. So if we were using hands and hand movement as a guideline, and you want to know who would be a better ping pong player, visualize if you had a volleyball player who all day long was reaching up and playing volleyball, or a music conductor who was all day long moving their arms up and down, in and out. It would seem like the music conductor would be a better ping pong player. On the other hand, some people could say, well, a volleyball player is watching a moving target all day long, and ping pong is watching a moving target, so they might be better. But their arms might not be used to being sideways. So we're making visual images based on habits and based on information, and reading requires all of that. So I want to get more into the different types of reading disabilities. Do we have any questions coming in? Because if we have questions, I can answer them. Otherwise, I'm going to go on to this.
Looking to read you the first question from Elena.
Okay.
So this is from Elena. She's in the UK. She couldn't attend live because it's a little past midnight where she is. But her question is, while reading, my 11-year-old daughter does a lot of word substitutions. An example could be reading word at, while on the page it says the. She substitutes one word for the other. This is not done on purpose. Is there an explanation to this problem, and how can it be fixed?
Okay. So her problem is that when she's reading a word, like the paper says the, but she'll say at. That's usually the sign of somebody who's in their head instead of really paying attention to what's on the paper. They're using the paper as a starting point and then going into their head. We have people like that. When I moved to Florida for a while, and I'm used to Lake Michigan, so when you talk about water, it's lake. And it said something on the paper, ocean, and I saw the word ocean, but I said lake because my head went into lake. And people would laugh because it's like, it doesn't say lake, it says ocean. People do that with house and home. So at and the are just small words. So to answer Alina's question, it sounds like your daughter's imagining things in her head and not paying as much attention to what's on the paper. That tells me that the floodlight is turned on, but not the pen light. So what we would do in a case like that would be to give her games and activities to develop the ability to use the pen light to see details and pay attention to details. It would be something you would find what she does in her everyday life, and then structure some activities around some activity that requires detail awareness, and just have her learn how to turn on that mental pen light. This chart here is taking, again, David Morgan's work. He has a beautiful sheet here. I think you can see it, called 8 Causes of Reading Difficulties. And then on the back of it, he has where you can check off the symptoms. And then the symptoms fall into one of the 8 categories. This is an old version. His new versions have 9 causes. So I've kind of consolidated them here, put them into how mind-eye would look at them. In visual aspects, some people use sight memories only, and you see them guessing words and spelling poorly. Other people use auditory memories in order to spell. So if you're trying to spell the word dolphin, it sounds like it's D-O-L-F-I-N, and the only way you know it's PH is to link what you've seen before with what you hear. So you have to use auditory memories and sight memories. If you don't use both of them and you lump them together, you're going to have guessing at words like Alina or poor spelling. Misjudging space. We talked a lot about misjudging space a couple of weeks ago at the Facebook Live. If you don't have the floodlight turned on, you're going to be skipping words and not finding the next line and losing your place during reading, because you're going to be having the pen light on and you're going to be word for word for word for word, and then say, oops, I'm at the end of the line. Where's the next line? Here it is. Next, next, next. Now I'm, oops, at the end of the line again. It detracts from the fun of reading because some of your mental attention is on where's the next line, where's the next word, the mechanics of reading, and then your brain can't use all of its attention on being aware of the content of what you're reading or the author's viewpoint. Stress is another way. Stress can shut down the floodlight and or the mental closet. And people are like, what in the world is a mental closet? Well, I envision it like a closet in your brain that has a setup. So if sensory signals are pouring into your brain one at a time because a teacher is talking or words are on a page in a book. If I throw you something in a closet, if I throw you a shoe, then a tie, then some underwear, then a shirt, then some pants, then another shoe. If you have an organized closet, you can get what I'm throwing you and put it away where it belongs. So at the end, if I say, quick, give me a pair of dress shoes, you can say shoes, those are all in shoe racks. Here's my shoe racks, here's the dress shoes, I'm done. But if you have a messy closet because it's not having a framework to set up, and somebody throws you a shoe and a tie and underwear and a shirt and pants, then you just throw them all in closet. And then somebody at the end says, get me dress shoes, and you have everything piled up and you have to hunt and hunt and hunt, and then eventually find one shoe and then hunt and hunt for the other one. Takes longer, it's more irritating, takes more energy, more time, and it's not fun. So when you're reading, if you have a mental closet, if your mind is set up with a framework, I'm going to be reading about the retina, and the retina is the lining of the eye. So if I start reading about one type of cell, it goes in this part. If I read about the thickness, it goes here. If I read about the blood flow, it goes there. Whatever topic you're reading about, if you have some framework set up already, then as you read the details, they have a place to go. You know, you're reading a science book about an experiment. Where's the main concept? What kind of main points are there? If you're reading a history book, you know, are you reading about countries? What dates were they talking about? What are the main causes of what's being explained? So if it's a war that you're talking about, what started the war? Which countries were in the war? If you have that set up so it's framed, then you can fill in the details. Books at school, when you're trying to read your books, they already have that done. So it's this chapter headings. And if you're reading magazines, the magazines will often have paragraphs, and each paragraph builds upon the previous one. So each paragraph has an idea in it. So when you set up your mental closet before you read for content, just skim with your floodlight, what's the general gist of this? And then you can go with the pen light and say, okay, we're going to be reading about something, this person's life, they lived 80 years, and here's what they accomplished. And then you zoom into details. So when you have stress, shutting down the floodlight, and we talked about that in the misjudgment of space, because your peripheral eyesight can shut down or expand, the floodlight can turn on and off. If the stress is shutting down your floodlight, or if the stress is preventing you from getting to an organized closet, then you're going to have problems like not recognizing the same word later in a sentence or a paragraph. You're going to have a small mental desktop is another possible thing. If you have a small mental desktop, which means what you're looking at one time, that means the pen light's going to be turned on, and blends would be hard because you'd have a long word and you're only reading one letter at a time. An example I use is the word should, S-H-O-U-L-D. So if you start it and you're just looking at S-H, you'd be show, but then you have this U-L-D, should. And then if you have another ER at the end of it, now it's back to shoulder. So you can't read that way easily. You'd have to expand your eyes, turn on the floodlight, see the whole word. The whole word is shoulder. If you zoom your attention onto the pen light, you're stuck in details and you lose track of that. So a small mental desktop would make blends hard, long words hard. It also has trouble, you don't have enough on the desktop to put into the memory bank. So it slides into the garbage can and your brain. And that's going to make poor comprehension. Then you have the children who can't hold on to one thing. They have the mental desktop, but their mind is wandering. So they're looking straight ahead and they're saying, okay, I'm reading. And I'm reading now about a kitchen. And then their mind goes, oh, I was in the kitchen. My kitchen has this, that. Your mind wanders. Or so even with attention deficit problems, there's two kinds. You can have your mind wandering internally of what you think about, which may be more exciting than the book you're reading. Or you can have your mind wandering from external distractions, too much noise around you, too many lights, too much movement. So these are some common things that we're looking at. And then David Morgan has put together a much more intricate list here. You know, that you can read a word on one page, but not on the next page. Guess the word, difficulty spelling. So I tried to take some of what he had and link it to what we're already doing at MindEye. But difficulty understanding the exact meaning of a sentence. So sometimes children will read a sentence and then have to stop to really think and figure out what it said. So reading can be exhausting for children who have trouble with the spatial awareness of where the words are. They're going to have trouble converting the words into pictures. They're going to have trouble finding the main points. And what we're looking at again at MindEye is why are they having that trouble? And we're looking at energy at an unconscious level, sensory skills and motor skills at a subconscious level, motivation and interest and emotional circuitry at a subconscious level, and then thinking at both a subconscious and a conscious level. And the thinking, we're looking at words, pictures, numbers, and sounds. Which way does the person interact more easily? And we're looking at auditory memory versus visual memory and how they're linked together, and figuring out how easily a person is able to access what's in their memory. So we're looking also not only at the 4 A's we discussed before with the attitude, adaptability, attention, and awareness, but we're looking at the 3 E's of energy, effort, and efficiency. Those are the main points that I wanted to cover for reading problems, and I'd like to leave it open for for anybody to have any questions. The other thing we had was here. We talked last time also about mental filtering, which is beneath conscious attention. So the conscious attention would be for reading, thinking of what you're reading about. But there's subconscious awareness, mental filtering, chemical systems like adrenaline, muscular systems, and then all of that are signals coming into each eye. When your right and left eyes don't make sense with each other, if they're not sending signals at the same speed, if your peripheral or your central is not balanced, or if your eyes and ears are not balanced, you're going to have trouble reading. And people are going to be like, well, you don't use your ears in reading, but yeah, you do. Because if you see a word like pint, P-I-N-T, your ears are what is telling you it's not pint, because it looks like pint. You have to say pint isn't a word, it must be pint. That's from auditory memories linking with what you see. So there is definitely a mind-eye connection, and we hope you make the connection. But this is the content, and now we're ready for anybody to have questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was great. The first question, it kind of ties into it. There was a question before that came in. I can't remember the name of the person, but they emailed and said, is this content going to be relatable to someone with PCS, post-concussive syndrome? And I do see a similar question here from Sandra that says, is this understanding only to be applied in children, or would it also work to understand individuals of all ages diagnosed with trauma disorders, which symptoms negatively impair reading skills?
Yes, it would be for more than just children. It would be children and adults. There's an emotional overlay. As I said, you have energy at the bottom, sensory and motor, emotions and thinking. So a trauma patient would have the emotions filtering out how they're thinking. So we would do the same type of things, but be cognizant that if there's a glitch at the emotional level, we might refer out for an ancillary practitioner. Sometimes there's EMDR is a very common way to deal with emotional trauma, which is eye movement desensitization. There's also, counselors, but there's also just a different way to look at what you're doing. It would be holding true for trauma also.
Is there a connection to dyslexia from Ronnie?
Yeah, dyslexia is a fancy way to say auditory and visual processing is not synchronized with each other. So we've found with patients over the years that when you alter their visual processing, their perception of the auditory space around them also changes, and then their diagnosis of dyslexia kind of vanishes. So sometimes I call it pseudo dyslexia, where it appears as though it's dyslexia, but it's not really dyslexia. True dyslexia is a poor, it means like if you had a keyboard and you push the letter G and an X came out, it's wiring wrong. So true dyslexia is where you're wired wrong, and you try to make your eyes move, you try to listen, and it doesn't synchronize. Pseudo dyslexia is like giving an iPhone to a 98-year-old and saying, here, it does everything. And they look at it and they don't know which buttons to push, or one of those universal remotes. And, somebody who's never seen it before. There's too many buttons. It has nothing wrong. The 98-year-old has nothing wrong, but they don't know which buttons to push, so they can't get what it does. That's what pseudo dyslexia is. The person has everything they need. They have no idea how to make their eyes move, how to judge the space, how to turn the words into pictures. So it's not, and it's the same on a computer. So when you talk about reading on a book versus a computer, the computer adds 2 extra complexities. Well, actually 3. One complexity would be the light shining in that's not coming off of a book. A second complexity is sometimes there's movement on the sides with pop-up features. So that pulls the floodlight, it pulls the attention away from what you're trying to read. And the third aspect of it, the light was the movement. was that you have to have your own hand sometimes engaged in scrolling. So rather than just flipping a page, you have to use your hand, and it's at a different angle. So for reading, you'd be looking downward at a paper, and for a computer, often it's pushed upward. So you're looking straight, your neck is in a different position.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know you're really passionate about dyslexia, so I was waiting. I was really excited for that answer. Mackenzie asked, how do you suggest improving reading comprehension?
How do you see that's a loaded question, because
Yeah.
the reading comprehension is the conscious level, and you have all the subconscious things and all the unconscious things. So in order to improve reading comprehension, you got to find out where's the glitch, where's the person not able to do something, build up that skill, and then the reading comprehension comes on its own. But it's like a hierarchy, and somewhere there's some problem. Fix the problem, and in order to fix the problem, it's all different. If the problem's like we talked about, at the energy level, the sensory level, the motor level, the emotional level, the thinking level, we have many people. Reading comprehension's poor because they can't pull a main point out of the story. They can't make inferences out of the story. And so you can do that with them, but usually there's something underlying that in their head, they haven't organized things into main points and details. So a lot of times we use internal visualization games to build those skills rather than saying, here, just read more. Sometimes it's poor visualization if they have poor spelling. Sometimes it's a poor mental desktop. Sometimes it's a poor mental closet. Sometimes it's a poor mental bulletin board, because the bulletin board in front of you in your mind has to have the main point on one part of it and the details on another part of it. So how do people process? So for Mackenzie, if she came in and said, I don't have good reading comprehension, fix me. First of all, we don't fix anybody, but we would assess where's your problem. But one of the ways to do that would be to ask her to describe something, and ask her how she plans and organizes events. Let's say she was having a dinner party, or let's say she was going on a camping trip. Is she good at visualizing the whole, figuring out a timeline, packing for the trip, or is she one of those people who doesn't pack and think about it? Does she make a list? Does she just do it from thinking? So how she processes in her normal everyday life would lead me to custom make something for helping her reading comprehension. We don't have just a blanket, all people who have poor reading comprehension do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Charlene asked, does this relate to computers as well? Charlene, I imagine you're talking about maybe the difference between reading print and reading on computers. Dr. Z, do you have anything to speak to on the differences there? I know you talked about scrolling and how peripheral activity there.
Yeah, I mean, I've had head trauma patients that couldn't read on a computer for more than 10 seconds, but they could read a book for an hour. So that for those people, it was the glare. But now the computers have the different programs where you can set the background at different colors.
Right.
You have the lighting different. But I even had one patient, he went to Europe to get away from screens, and all his symptoms from his concussions were better. And then he came back to America and went through the passport thing where he had to look at it, put his face in a computer to have it scanned for seconds, like 2-3 seconds. And that was enough to set off all his symptoms again. So computers can trigger all kinds of symptoms in people. So do I have an answer of how to make the computers better? Just try, probably just try at different angles, because leaning it, tilting it backwards or forwards makes a difference. And also changing the different colors and lightings and brightness and contrast. And you have to play with that to figure out where your comfort and tolerance ranges are.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so bear with me. This is a loaded question. This is from Elizabeth. It says, I hear you talk about intention and attention. These are clearly important concepts. As a special educator working with adolescents with autism, developmentally delayed, Should I seek student-centered instruction over curriculum-based instruction? For example, some resources recommend teaching one core, Dolch/Fry, so one core per week, one core word per week, excuse me. Is there more bang for the buck, quote unquote, in individualized instruction based on maximizing safety/connection, looking for student attention, etc.? Is the difference in the two approaches significant in terms of maximizing learning opportunity?
Well, that's a real loaded question.
Yeah.
Selwyn Super, who died a couple of years ago, he had a book. So I think her first thing she should do is read his book. And it's called Intention, Attention, and Inattention. Because so it's not just intention versus attention. There's also inattention, where you're not paying attention. So his book is fantastic. As far as taking I don't know what you said, David, with one core word per week versus what? Like you're saying the two methods. One method is core word per week, and what's the other method?
Teaching one core word per week. Student-centered instruction over curriculum-based instruction.
I believe that student-centered instruction, tailoring what you're doing per student, I've always believed is easier, because sometimes you're trying to make students who think a particular way, who aren't adaptable, especially if you're working with the autistic population. Most of them are not adaptable. They have to do it one way with a very specific routine. And if you change their routine, they go crazy. So I believe a student-centered way is easier. And then as you build adaptability, then you can slowly get them into the curriculum. I'm hoping that helps. I actually didn't use the word intention in anything I said today. I talked about motivation and interest, but I didn't use the word intention. But Selwyn Super's book would be the first place I would tell her to go. It talks about how you have the three like the intention, attention, and inattention, and how you deal with them differently.
Yeah. So I'm going to keep reading questions. I did want to let people know, we are going to cut this short at some point. So I'm sorry if we don't reach your questions. But we do, again, you can connect with one of our new patient advocates. They're very educated and can help answer any of your questions as well. So if we don't reach you, there's going to be a link in the chat to reach out to them. So please do so if we miss you. So next is Janine asks, I'm a TBI survivor who is able to read any word very well, but literally remember close to nothing the second later. So I don't even have the energy to go to the next page. It is extremely frustrating. Throughout my life, I have extremely rarely read a full book, finished a whole TV show or movie. I honestly have no idea how I went to college and completed courses. Congratulations, that's excellent. By only reading segments of a book or notes. Any helpful ideas?
Well, somebody who's talking about not being able to maintain attention and know what they read by the end of the chapter is telling me, but they went through college, telling me loud and clear that their auditory channels are the way they learn. Visual, so put things in your eyes and you have no idea what went in. Put things in your ears and you manage to muddle through. So you would have to use your auditory strengths to build your visual abilities. So you could start by listening to the old-fashioned radio shows, which require listening and making visual images. And then once you get that, the part of your brain making visual images really solid, then you slowly introduce the visual inputs to link with the visual images. And then you eventually get into words converting to images. So that would be like a stage one, build the visual imagery through auditory. Stage two, put the visual inputs in the link with that visual imagery section in your brain. Stage three, convert words into pictures. And stage four, convert the words into visual imagery, and then hold on to main points. It would be a stage by stage development of reading comprehension.
So now Steph asks, so this it seems unrelated to reading, but we'll ask it. I was one of those people without 3D awareness that walked out of a 3D movie with what I assume is at least somewhat like what others see. I've enjoyed 3D, but also notice a lessening of spatial memory. Should I be concerned?
When you say a lessening of spatial memory, can you write what that means? I don't know what lessening of spatial memory means.
We can wait for that to come in. In the meantime, how about this? I'll ask Mackenzie asks, how do you suggest people with ADHD do to limit the mind wandering discussed?
A lot of times if the mind is wandering, it's either because they're worried about something, or it'll wander, like if you have too much alcohol or something, there's a chemistry thing going on. So we sometimes will have people work with a nutritionist, or we'll have them consider, what they're eating and see if their minds wander less, at different times of the day, or if they have eaten different things. We had a kid once, he would come home from school and the mother would have fights with him in order. She'd give him like milk and cookies when he came home, and then she'd want him to do homework, and he wouldn't and couldn't, and it was a fight. She switched him to protein instead of sugar, and would give him peanut butter sandwiches when he came home, or hard-boiled eggs or something. And she said he was a different kid. And so a lot of times it's linked with some sort of biochemistry, physiological stuff. And so for the person whose mind is wandering, I would have them compare when they eat proteins versus when they eat starches, what happens to their brain, and whether their attention is changed, whether the mind doesn't wander as much. Or time-wise, it's not even just what you eat, it's when. So I've had people that, if they eat their dinner at 6 p.m. and nothing afterwards, they can do a whole evening's worth of work. But if they eat their dinner at 8 p.m., then they're gone, so that they can't. So first you have to do some experiments to see when the mind wandering is and what changes it. And when you see which factors change it, then you can go from there. Mm-hmm. Did the Steph write?
I haven't seen anything from Steph just yet. So we're going to take just a couple more questions, unless Steph, if you can explain to us what you mean by spatial memory. That we'd be happy to answer that one as well. So Judana asks, as an adult, Prism readers help me tremendously, but now I'm told they don't recommend them anymore. I wear contacts now. However, do they make bifocal prisms?
They make bifocal prisms. You can make bifocals with prisms in them, but I'm trying to figure out what they mean. I'm assuming that you mean prism glasses, which are magnifying glasses that are just meant for reading. I'm assuming that's what you mean. If that's what you mean, then yes, you can have bifocals that do that also. Mm-hmm. Those sometimes they're like they pull the light outwards. So there's other ways you can get the same effect without that kind of a prism. But yes, they do make bifocal prisms.
Okay, so Steph did respond. She said, losing track of where things have been left a moment later. She said, also have I'm going to butcher this, aphantasia or aphantasia.
So that means aphantasia would be not being able to make imagery in your head. There are some people, it's a really small percentage that can't do the imagery in their head. Losing track of where things have been left a moment later. So you were saying that you don't see 3D, but you went to a 3D movie and you come out and you were asking, is there anything to be concerned about? If you truly have the inability to make images, then, and that's who you've been your whole life and you didn't just lose it in adulthood, then no, you don't have anything to be concerned about. Because the average person, they don't lose track of things that have been left if they're if they make an image in their head. So if you don't have the ability to make images in your head and you put something down, that's when there's something called mindfulness. Amy Zellmer has an entire brain health magazine on mindfulness coming out, I think September 1. So that would be something for Steph to consider. Mindfulness means being in the moment, so that if your hand puts something down, you are right with it. And then you're remembering, I'm putting my pen down here, I'm putting my keys down here. So I think Steph would be benefited by looking into mindfulness. You can Google it. You can read Amy Zellmer's blogs with mindfulness, and that'll be really helpful for somebody who can't image.
Yeah. And the name of Amy Zellmer's blog is Faces of TBI. What's the name of the magazine?
Brain Health. I think it's just called Brain Health.
Brain Health magazine. Gotcha. So yeah, Faces of TBI, Amy Zellmer. Okay, thank you, Steph. All right, so last one here. It's from Mary Ellen. It says, can you speak to taking information from a board and transferring to the page by writing? For example, my child can read for a longer period of time, a whole book, but when faced with the task of copying, fatigues by about 8 words.
There's a giant difference between copying and reading. First of all, with reading, you can use a pen light, and it's just a small little area of space you're dealing with. When you're copying off a board, you have to take that pen light, look up, find the word you want, memorize it, look down, find the pencil and then write it. Then look up and then look down, and then look up and then look down. So that shifting of space is really exhausting if you don't turn the floodlight on. So if you have a child who can only copy 8 words, that means they are not turning their floodlight on. The floodlight, with being bigger, would allow you to move the pen light in and out real quickly and efficiently. And in addition to that, when you're copying, you have to get everything exactly right. I'm copying the word dolphin, I got to write it down, dolphin. If you're just reading and your kid can read a whole book, they don't have to read every single word in the book. They can read just, especially if it's a fiction book and they're just reading for fun, you can slide over words that are long. You can, a character whose name is really long, you just make it, oh, that's the character whose name starts with a D. That's another. You don't have to read letter for letter. So for reading, you can turn a small pen light on and have this section, flip your pages and be done. But the bigger space is harder. So somebody like that, I would be curious about how they played sports. And because there would be 2 ways this could go. One way would be a child who's great at sports, who has a big awareness and can follow a ball, which is great with moving targets, but not with stationary targets. The other way is if her child can't do sports, then that says they've got to open up the space that they're comfortable with. So we have two ways her child could be, and it would hinge on whether they're good at sports. If they are good at sports, that means they've got the floodlight. They don't know how to use a pen light combined with the floodlight. If they don't play sports well, it means they're not turning the floodlight on well. And so the treatment would be 2 different ways. One would be developing the link between a pen light and floodlight and the adaptability. The other one would be developing the floodlight.
Perfect. All right, so that's it. Okay, so I just want to thank everyone for attending. Thank you, Dr. Z, for answering all these questions and continuing to teach me even after all these years. Just continue to learn. Again, if we didn't connect with you, we didn't answer any questions, please connect with one of our new patient advocates. They're there again to just educate on what we do and see if you're a good fit for us, if we're a good fit for you, those kinds of things. Again, thank you so much. Dr. Z, you want to say anything to send us out?
No, I think everybody, I think you should check out the websites. Let me put this back on so you have them.